Let's continue to develop our theme from scratch. I'm going to pick up right where I left off before. So at this point, we have simply made a style.css file with the necessary WordPress elements, and we created an index.html. This file does not contain anything, and it exists inside the template folder. This is the minimum requirements to make a theme, but obviously our theme is not very useful at this point. So what we need to do is we need to edit the template for this index.html. If we go to Appearance, Editor, you will see that it opens up the editor, and you should be familiar with this. If we go to Templates, we currently only have one template, and it's completely empty. This is our index template. If we click on this template and we edit it, you will see that we can go ahead, and I'll just put a heading in here for right now. So I'll just say, welcome to Mar. And if I save this and we go back out to the front end and refresh, you can see that it's going to display that content. Now, clearly, I have not done any kind of design or modified this in any sort of way. I just wanted to show you that this index.html template file is controlling what happens to our front end. Now, if we go ahead and look back in our development version of WordPress, you will see that the index.html file does not contain any of this information. Let's take a minute and talk about what's happening here. The difference comes down to where the change is made and how WordPress saves and manages those changes. When you modify the index.html file yourself, it basically means that you are editing the index file that is saved inside of the WP content, themes, your theme, template folder. So this would be the index file that we had made previously. These changes are made on the file level, which means that it exists outside of the WordPress admin panel. These changes are part of the theme code. They're version controlled and portable. The pros are that you have full control over the structure. This is a great technique for developers working locally or via FTP. The changes can be pushed with updates or shared across sites. The cons are if the admin makes changes in the editor, those changes may override your template visually. It also requires file access and technical knowledge. If you modify the index.html files via the WordPress site editor, this means that you would have gone into the admin portion of WordPress, Appearance, and Editor. You are visually adjusting templates, adjusting blocks, rearranging content, etc. So this is what we did when we were modifying our index.html template inside of WordPress. And what WordPress does is it saves those changes to the database, not to the actual index.html file that exists inside of our theme folder. The pros are that no code is required. So this is a great, friendly way for site editors and designers to modify the content. The changes are live instantly, and you don't need FTP or local setup. The cons are that it overrides your physical index.html file, so WordPress will always use the version in the database. This makes it more difficult to version control or revert changes cleanly, and it's not automatically synced with file-based changes unless it's completely reset. So the WordPress editor versus modifying theme files. If you edit in the WordPress site editor, it's going to be saved in the database. This is how site admins and designers should utilize WordPress, and the files are overwritten at the file level updates, so if the theme is reset. If you edit the index.html file within the theme folder, that's going to be saved in your theme directory. Developers are the ones that typically will use this, and it can be overwritten by the WordPress editor updates. So hopefully that clarifies why we see the changes in WordPress, but we don't see the changes in our development version. Because we want to be modifying these changes outside of WordPress, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete this. But what we will do is I'm going to show you a way that you can actually build the content and then grab the code and bring it into your index.html file. If you are new to this type of coding, it will definitely be easier for you to build out how you want the files to look inside of WordPress. Instead of starting with our index template, we're going to just save this as it is, which of course is going to get us back to a blank template with nothing on it. And we will go into the WordPress editor and we're going to begin by modifying a header. So currently I don't have any of these things, but I'm going to go into patterns. And of course, our pattern area is currently empty, but what we can do is we can control patterns. And patterns are how we can control things like headers and footers, among other elements that you might want to add to your WordPress website. I will click Add Pattern, and I'm going to choose to make a template part. I don't actually want a pattern, but I want to add a template part. I'll choose template part, and I'm going to go ahead and specify that I want to create a header. I'm going to need to give this a name, so we'll just give this a name of main header, and I'm going to make sure that the header template part is defined, and I'll click Add. And now it takes me into the WordPress editor, and we can begin to build out our main header. We'll go ahead and do this next. I'll begin by adding a few items. I'll start off by adding my site logo. So I'm going to place that here, and we are going to align this to the center. Underneath this element, I'm going to create the site title. These items are going to be dynamically pulled from the content in my website. And then underneath that, we will use our site tagline. And I'm just making sure all of these things are centered. Now that I have this, I want to be able to insert information. So I'm going to click on my site logo. Because I have not chosen that yet, I'll click Choose Logo. I'll go to my media library. I'm going to grab the site logo that I want to use, and we'll just give this a alt tag. This doesn't show up against the white background because the text is white, but we'll fix that shortly. The other thing that I want to do is I want to be able to make modifications to the font family and to the background and various things like that. As you know, if we open styles, we can set these things. So in this window, we are able to set the text color and the background color for the text. And under typography, if I turn all of the options on, these are the settings I have. It is worth noting that I don't have the option currently to change the font style, and that's because I have not yet defined that. So we'll need to come back to this. I also want to point out that ultimately I want this whole area to have a background color. So I'm going to go to List View, and because these things currently just exist independently, I will select all of them. I'm going to group them together. And as you can see, I now have this group. And if we go into the group, we can now specify a background color. So the options I have are the default colors that come with WordPress. Now, this is not exactly what I want to have happen. I want to use my own colors. So we will circle back once we add our own colors so we can make sure that this is the appropriate color. But I did want to show you what we have right now. The other option that I did want to mention is at this point, there is no way for me to stretch this group so that it takes up the entire width. There is nothing available for me to do in this part of WordPress. You might be wondering, why are these things missing? We have seen these things before in other projects that we've worked with. Usually when you select an item, such as a group, you can control the width of it or specify if you wanted to follow the default content width, things like that. But unfortunately, we do not have that option. And that is because we're currently working on our new empty template. So we are going to need to add some of these details. Before I leave this page right now, I'm going to go into Advanced, and I'm going to come down here to the HTML element. By default, WordPress is always going to make any sort of group or anything a div. Divs are not semantic, so I am a big fan of using semantic HTML. Because this is ultimately going to be my header, I'm going to change this to the header. So you can see that you have this drop-down menu, and it allows you to choose from a variety of semantic HTML elements. I will choose header, and then that's all I can really do at this point. So I'm going to save this. And if we go back to the front end part of WordPress and refresh, we're not going to see that because we haven't specified that we want to use the header inside our index template. We'll click on the chevron next to patterns to go back to the default menu. I'm going to go to templates. I want to go to my Mar custom theme. And what we'll do is we'll click on this. And once again, this is currently empty. I'm going to click the plus sign here. We're going to go to patterns. And what I want to do is I want to find my pattern. So if we look through the patterns, you can see that there's a bunch of patterns. We actually have some header patterns, and it is generating header patterns. And although this one kind of looks like what we did, it isn't because we don't see that background color. So we are not actually seeing our pattern show up in this area. If I go to all, it's going to just show me all of these patterns right here. So this is not actually what I want to do. I want to use my pattern. Why isn't our pattern showing up? Well, it's because we have not yet registered this with our theme. So now that we've made this pattern, we know that it exists under patterns. And here it is under all template parts. The same thing is under header. So both of these things are here. What we need to do is we need to create this element inside of our theme. So what I will do is I'm going to click on our main header. And if we go to the three dots right here, you can actually go ahead and go into the code editor. This is going to give us the code that was used to create this particular element. This contains some comments, which is how WordPress currently works to apply these things. You can see that the background color is being applied as this cyan bluish gray, which is what I chose when I selected this. We're actually just going to get rid of this because we ultimately don't want it to be this color, and I'm going to remove this from the main header code. And then here's our header, and you can see it's going to add classes here. So it has some different classes. We're going to get rid of this has cyan bluish gray background color because, again, we don't need that. And we probably don't even need has background at this point. We could have deleted those from the visual editor as well. So if I click exit code editor, it takes me back. And now we have these three elements, but there is no background. I did want to mention that to you. So I'm going to go back into the code editor. And now that this is a little bit more simplified, I'm going to select this code and copy it. And now we'll return to our code editor. What we're going to do is we're going to make a new folder. We'll call this folder parts. And inside this folder, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a new file, and we're going to call the file header.html. Because I named this with HTML, my editor just defaults and gives me some standard HTML code. I'm going to delete that and paste in the code that I copied from WordPress. I will save this file. And just to prove a point, I'm going to go back to WordPress. We will go ahead and just exit. And again, here's these template parts. What I am going to do is I'll leave these here for right now. But if we refresh our page and just reload the page, you can now see that I have something new called header. This is the header that is coming from our code that we just modified. So for instance, if I put something in here and I'm just going to place a bit of static HTML, I'll just write I'm here inside of a paragraph tag. If we go ahead and save this file and go back to the front end portion of WordPress, and if I refresh, you can see that it is showing up with this code. And if we exit the code editor, it's letting me know that it kind of has some unexpected invalid content. It's not expecting me to put straight HTML. But what I did want to draw your attention to is the fact that whatever changes I make, it's going to populate here. So let's just jump back into the editor. We don't want this anyways, and it's problematic. So I'll just delete this paragraph, save this once again, come back into WordPress. We'll refresh the page. That information disappears from the code editor. And if I go back to the visual editor, we can see that that doesn't exist. So at this point, what I have is I have my own custom header template part, and it is being identified as a header template part. Now that we have our own custom header that's coming from our theme, we want to register this so that it gets pulled into our index template file. Currently, it doesn't exist, and there's no way for me to really find it at this point because I have not yet registered this particular element. So what we need to do is we want to register our header.html template so that WordPress knows about it. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to disable the other WordPress patterns. This is not necessary, but I just find it to be kind of confusing that if I go to template parts, there's this one that we created in WordPress. It still exists. We have our one coming from our custom theme. They have similar names. It just can be a little confusing. So let's go ahead and clean those things up. We're going to jump back into our code editor. And the first thing we need to do is we'll register our header.html template part. This is going to be something that we're going to add to our index.html. So I'm going to go into templates, index.html. Currently, we don't have anything in this file. And what we need to do is we need to add an HTML comment. And when we write this in WordPress, we actually do a / and we close the comment. So this is more typical of a closing indicator from pre-HTML5 days. And then I'm going to write WP:/template dash part, and I'll open a set of curly braces. And in the curly braces inside of quotes, I'm going to write a slug. After the closing quote, I'll put a colon, and then I'll open another set of quotes and I'm going to write header. And that is all I need. It's not a lot. As long as we have named our header file and it exists inside of the parts folder, WordPress is going to automatically pick this up. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the default WordPress patterns. We'll need to place this inside of a functions.php file in order for this to work correctly. So I'm going to create functions.php, and inside of the functions.php file, we'll go ahead and we'll add the necessary code. Of course, I need to wrap this inside of PHP tags. I'll make a comment that says disable all default block patterns. And then I'm just going to use remove_theme_support. And inside of parentheses, inside of single quotes, we're going to write core block patterns. We'll end this with a semicolon. I'm going to save my functions file. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a theme.json file so that we can pre-register the header and any other template parts that we might want to use. The reason why this is important is because when we register a header or any other pattern in WordPress, it allows WordPress to officially recognize it as a real template part before the site editor or anything else touches it. So this eliminates any guessing about database weirdness. It will also allow this element to appear properly in the site editor so that when we go to Appearance Editor, the site editor UI can actually list our header with its title and its description correctly. If we don't do this, WordPress doesn't know it exists until you manually add it. In addition, it makes our theme more stable and future-proof. WordPress is heavily moving towards structured themes, so using theme.json makes sure that the theme works in the same way today and in future WordPress updates, and that the site editor has all of the data it needs without any extra guessing. This is deemed as official best practice for block themes as of WordPress. I think it's 5.9 and beyond. So this is the preferred way to configure everything: colors, typography, spacing, templates, template parts. Everything stays in a centralized area, which allows it to be much more clean and easier to update. So let's go ahead and jump in and add the necessary code to our theme.json file. We'll make a new file in the root, and this is going to just be called theme.json. And inside of this file, we need to make some basic JSON code. When you are creating your own theme.json file, we have to start off with some basic code that the theme.json file is going to require. We're going to wrap everything in a set of curly braces, and then we're going to first start to identify the schema and the version. So let's do that now. Schema basically tells WordPress which JSON rules to validate against. It is optional, but it helps editors to know what options are available. We're going to want to specify version. This is the version of theme.json 2 that we're using. And then we're going to make a list or an array of template parts that our theme defines. These would be reusable sections like headers, footers, sidebars. So we're going to do that by, after this comma right here, we'll write template parts inside of double quotes. We'll add a colon, and then because we're making an array, we need to open a set of square braces. And inside of the array, we're going to open a set of curly braces. And then we're going to need to add some information that describes this particular element. So what we need to do here is we need to define a few different attributes. I'll place them in here and then let's talk about them. The first one is name, header. This is the machine name or the slug. It must match the file name of our header.html inside of parts. So it has to say header. We don't need the HTML. The title is the human readable name that's going to show up in our site editor. And just to prove a point, let's just call this my header. I might change this to header afterwards. The area tells WordPress that this template part should be used in the header area. Other options that we have would be footer, sidebar, and uncategorized. And the description is just a helpful text that's shown in the editor explaining what this template part is for. This is going to make sure that WordPress officially knows about header.html. It will appear in our site editor under template parts, and it's going to know that this part should usually show at the top of the page because the area is set to header. Let's save this. I'll go back to WordPress. I'm just going to make sure I refresh. And if I go into patterns, you will see either under all template parts or header, it says my header. And that is because we had changed the name to say my header. If I just simply call this header and I save this and we go back to the front end and refresh, then it's just going to show up as header. And at this point, I don't really need this, right? We don't need this anymore. This exists as something that we made inside of WordPress. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this item right here and I'm going to click the trash. This is going to throw this away. I only want this header to be here. Now that we have this code, let's go back to our template area. You can see that our template is still showing up as being empty. If you see this happening and the error message you get if you try to view your page in the front end says something like this page is blank because the template is empty, but you know that you've added content into the template. The reason that it's doing this is that WordPress is using a blank version of our index.html that's saved in the database. It's not yet using our themes file. So even though we have an index file inside of our custom theme, WordPress copied it into the database already. Maybe this happened when we first activated our theme or when we opened the site editor, but now it's stuck on this blank version. That's why we're seeing that message. So in order to fix it, we need to go into the template section of the site editor. We need to find our template. So this is our index template. And at this point, this is the same template under all templates or under Mar custom theme. I need to go to the 3 dots right here, and we need to choose reset. And as soon as we do that, it's going to ask us if we want to reset to default and clear all customizations. We're going to click yes. And now you can see this is showing up. And at this point, if I go back to the front end portion of WordPress and I refresh, we do see our header template being injected into our website. So as you can see, we have now created our own custom header.html part. We're pulling that part into our index.html template. We're using the functions to disable or remove all of WordPress's core block patterns, so we're not distracted by those. And finally, we're using theme.json so that we can add the template part section to our WordPress website. This will allow the header template part to automatically show up inside of the WordPress editor under template parts header. We will continue to work on this. We obviously have some styling and we want to add some additional functionality into our custom theme.